afraid of fame. So I was just wondering what you were chasing at that time, what you were looking for when you met Garbage.
I wasn't afraid of fame, I was repulsed by fame, which is a different thing. I always found it very gauche, and all the bands that I loved were never really famous, i.e. they weren't, they weren't Madonna, I was into Echo and the Bunnymen, I was into Susie and the Banshees, I was into the Smiths, they're all sort of like what I thought of as kind of the edges of fame, But when Garbage hit me up, it was at the end of a career with a band. I had been in a band for 10 years before Garbage, which people don't realise it was that long. It was a long time to be in a band. And we had gotten into really severe financial difficulties. We were managed by an absolute shyster of a manager. It really wasn't very funny at all, as it turns out, because I was not a participating member of the writing partnership in this band, but the manager, the so-called manager, had not protected us legally, so when the taxman came for the money, I was responsible for the money, having earned none of the money. And I was freaking out, because I didn't have any money, I'd never made any money, I had no chance of ever, at that time, I had no possibility of giving the taxman what he was due. So when I was hit up by Butch and the band, I had no choice really in my mind. I was like, I have no future, I have no job, I didn't stick in at school, I had nothing, so I had no choice, So I leapt on a plane and went to America with 3 men I didn't know. I wouldn't advise anyone ever doing that.
If you were talking to your niece, you'd tell us to never do that.
I just don't recommend it. I was really lucky in that they turned out great, they're great people, but it could have been really ugly for me and it wasn't. But anyway, cut to, this shyster of a manager ended up in jail, and I ended up with a mad £350,000 tax debt, which with my first cheque from Garbage I had to pay off to stop my bandmates from being bankrupt. They had children and I couldn't let that happen to them, so I'm still bitter about it. I'm glad I did the right thing, but I'm still bitter about it.
So that was your first Garbage paycheck?
Yeah. Yeah. Trust me, it wasn't out of the kindness of my heart. I just felt like it had to be done. It was sort of a decent thing to do, but I resented every penny and still do.
How much stock do you put in fate? Because a lot of this is to do with serendipity. There are a couple of weird serendipitous, good word, moments. Like one, Steve discovered you in the one and only time that Angel Fish would play on MTV. He could have been in the toilet.
Yeah.
Anything could happen. And B, the day Butch first met you was the day that Kurt Cobain died. So that was him very much drawing a line under his past and starting a new chapter as well. Is that a head fuck?
It's a bit of a head fuck. It is something that's overshadowed us our entire career in a funny way. Because, when a great icon dies, and it's to your benefit in some ways, that feels really uncomfortable, and still does. I always hate telling this story. It feels really yucky that my future began the night we discovered Kurt Cobain had taken his life. And it's always bothered me and made me sad about it, but at the same time I'm very grateful that we have this mad little thread, between us and this extraordinary artist. I feel particularly bad for Butch, because this was somebody he really cared about, and clearly it changed Butch's whole life, and therefore by default ended up changing mine. But I've said this to you before, there are millions and millions and millions of people in the audience and elsewhere who have as much talent, have as many great ideas, who just don't get that same kind of luck that we did. Serendipity is a beautiful word, but I also sort of think of it more as just, you have to have some talent, you have to have some good ideas, but you also have to enjoy this moment of luck, and we really did. Not luck, I'm not associating with Kurt Cobain's death by any stretch of imagination, but that we could parlay this sort of moment, this dark moment that could have drowned a lot of other people, and I have to give kudos to Butch for this, is like somehow he managed to, much like Dave Grohl, take something dreadful and sad and heartbreaking and destructive and turn it into something wonderful, you know. So,
because one of the beautiful things about Garbage is you are kind of 4 ragtag randoms thrust together by fate.
we really are.
How long did it take for kind of the chemistry to start flowing?
We had chemistry right from the start, which is really amusing when you know us, because we're so different. And I remember meeting them. To this day, I can remember walking into the hotel. It was a landmark hotel on Edgware Road, I think. Does that make sense, Londoners? I think it was the Edgware Road, and it was called the Landmark Hotel anyway. It was in a major thoroughfare, and I walked into this hotel, and I was wearing a really cheap fake fur coat. Nothing much has changed, as you can see. That I had bought for £5 in a charity shop opposite my house. This wasn't much more expensive, to be honest. But I can remember walking into this posh hotel, and I was really overwhelmed by the hotel. I'd never been in somewhere so posh and mad in my life. And I walked to the very back, and they were in the atrium, and they were having tea. And I can still see them all as though it was yesterday. And I was like, Jesus fucking Christ. Really? You know, the most unlikely looking people to start a band with. You know, to be fair, I'd come from a band that were very visually striking and sort of very rebellious by nature and very sort of interested in style. And here I walk into this hotel, and like Duke has a mullet. Butch is wearing shorty shorts, i.e. above the knee, which I was just like, that is unforgivable for a grown man. Okay, thank God. Oh shit, sorry mate. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. And the saving grace which stopped me from walking out of the hotel was Steve Marker, who is like my main man in Garbage, wore really cool John Lennon glasses, and he had a New York Knicks t-shirt on, which is like a super cool basketball team that I mean I'm mad about basketball, so I was like, okay, I'll take the meeting. I'll just at least not panic and take the meeting. And then we started talking, and immediately we just liked each other, and we enjoyed each other's company. And even though we've had our problems, you know, we've been together now for 25 years, we still intrinsically like one another. And I have been kind to one another, even though it's sometimes a challenge.
So, with that in mind, you're with 3 musicians you respect, and you've poured your heart and soul into this record. You're starting to get success. And there's this phrase you use in the book, which is a lot of people just saw you as 3 old dudes and a chick. I mean, how can you describe about finding the balance between putting your own voice forward and going, I'm the fucking singer, I wrote these songs, but by the way, respect these guys behind me?
Wow, well that's a profound question, to be honest, because if I'm really, really honest, I didn't really get to that point until I was 45 years old. And it really, I mean, this could go into a whole other territory about how we raise our children, but I had no belief in myself as a musician, as an artist, as a voice, as an opinion, as an attitude. I felt from a very early age as a young woman, I was erased. And I was only a physical being in the world. And then as I became more and more objectified through our success, that just exacerbated these problems. And I've talked quite recently about this. I actually wrote an op-ed piece for the New York Times. I was a cutter as a kid, and success with the band exacerbated those feelings, and I wanted to cut again. I mean, it's such a complicated, weird thing to express and explain, but it took me a long time as a human being to recognise my worth as an artist. And now that I'm 52 years old, I own it, and I know that no one can take it away from me. And that's an extraordinary feeling, but I feel a certain kind of heartbreak, not really for myself, but for a lot of young women that I see go through the same thing as me. You know, we just played a show last night in Newcastle, and we had this incredible young band called Estrons open for us. with this great front person who's struggling with all the same things that I struggled with. She's beautiful. She is being objectified by the press. She's incredibly talented and she's really angry. And I can tell she's like a young pony, you know, like she's ready to run. She's like ready for this track. But she's so messed up by how people treat her, and also I feel like this sort of like confusion about her worth. Is it her beauty, or is it who she is as an artist? And of course, you know, ultimately a sane person would say, what's your worth as an artist? Is it your creative input into the world? But she's confused, like most women are, the way that we're all reared. You know, we're so sort of forced into thinking that it matters what we look like, you know. My niece, 8 years old today, was asking, am I pretty? I was like, what does it fucking matter if you're pretty? Well, I didn't say fucking. Did you? But I did say to her, does it matter if you're pretty? Is it not more important that you're kind? Yeah. You know, she looked at me like I was mad, but, you know. It's a complicated answer, I'm sorry, I'm whittering on, and I'm not being very concise, but that's my answer to your question. I did my best, Andrew.
That was a very good answer. And how would you kind of describe your relationship with the press back then? Because on the one hand, they're trying to pin you up as some kind of female spokesperson for a generation. You're saying these things about your own struggles and self-mutilation, etc. And then on the other hand, they're describing you as a piece of meat. And there's a bit in the book where they say they're talking about if you're more fuckable than the girls from Steps.
Yeah, I mean, and again, any female in the audience tonight will agree that this is part of how women move through the world. It's not specific to artists, it's not specific to me, it's specific to women.
Yes, Shirley.
You're welcome, darling. And, you know, at the risk of like bringing something up that seems sort of unconnected to what we're talking about, you know, the metoo movement is a sudden siphoning off, a pressure release to how women feel all over the globe, and how we are taught how to negotiate, you know, our lives, how we figure things out, and how we value ourselves. And it's complicated. And it's not, I'm not laying this at the feet of men, I'm not laying it at the feet of women. This is an issue we face as a culture, and it's something it is a duty of all of us as adults to figure this out, so that younger generations don't suffer from what we are all currently going through, which is women angry and men confused, and men literally wondering whether they can wink at somebody in the street. And feeling they're justified, that they're feeling sad, that they can't wink at somebody if they want to. Oh, I'm so sorry, guys. You can no longer wink at women in the street. We don't fucking want to be winked at. Now the question is, like, men, and a lot of women actually, it's not just men, are saying, oh, Jesus fucking Christ, you know, can't we just have fun? It's like, of course we can have fun. But until a lot of people learn how to manage themselves and control themselves, we need to have really strict rules so we can all operate freely and not be threatened and not feel that we all have to conform, you know, and this goes back to what you're asking me about. You know, when as an adult now, as a 52-year-old fully informed woman, when I look at what people wrote about me back then, I literally want to go and rip their thoraxes out. Like, how dare you speak to a young artist like that? And they certainly were not speaking to my male counterparts like that. And they never will, never would. So what gives somebody a right to speak about a young artist like that? And by the way, it wasn't just male artists, male journalists, it was female journalists too. And so back then it really did bother me, and it ate into my confidence and upset me and made me furious. And I am the lucky one, I've survived. For a lot of different reasons. One being I had a great band who supported me. I fell in with an incredible mate who has helped me negotiate a lot of complicated feelings. And I am a fucking motherfucker. And I am... You know, a lot of women though are not built like me. They're not as articulate as me. They didn't enjoy such a great education as me, or they weren't nourished. I had an amazing mother. You know, I had a mother who was like, you don't ever feel less than any man, ever. You stand toe to toe and you push until you get what you want. Now, a lot of people don't have mothers like that. A lot of people have shitty fathers. You know, I'm not really making very much sense tonight. I'm sorry, I've had a few Aperol spritzes. I don't know what to tell you. All I know is things have to change, and we have to be part of that. We have to help change society. And we need men on our side. We need male allies.
Yeah.
Let's just be really